So, The Flash Season 6 recently concluded a few episodes early due to the current pandemic going around the world right now, and while that does suck, I am really happy that it got some sort of conclusion. It not only allows me to move on from the season, but also be content enough to review the season as a whole, because I feel like if they had just said episode 19 was the last for a while, then I wouldn't really have been okay reviewing the season, because if the last couple episodes came out, what would I do? Just make an addendum review? So I am really happy that it got some sort of finale. Now, whether that finale is good and fulfilling is up to the individual viewer. So now let's figure out what my thoughts on Season 6 are. So The Flash Season 6 brought a whole new set of changes to the show, because it not only had a new showrunner in the form of Eric Wallace replacing Todd Helbing, but also a new format where one half is focused on one villain, Bloodwork, and the other half is focused on another villain, Mirror Master or Mirror Mistress, whichever you prefer. It also had the great task of dealing with the CW's biggest crossover yet, Crisis on Infinite Earths. Both before and after the crossover, there's a ton of stuff tying into it, whether it's leading up to Barry's seemingly inevitable death in the Crisis, or the outcome and after effects of the Crisis, whether that be New Earth or everyone just getting over Barry's death, or lack thereof in general. And because of these changes, I was a little cautious going in, but still super excited because I love this show, and I'm really happy to say that The Flash Season 6 is awesome. Like, really awesome. Firstly, the new arc format is an absolute breath of fresh air. Obviously, this isn't new. Shows do this all the time. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is a superhero show that has done it countless times, and it works there very well. And I don't hate having one story over an entire season. In fact, I think I still kind of prefer that format, because when done well, we get seasons like 1 and 5, where, in my opinion, the story arc is paced exceptionally well, and there's a very satisfying conclusion at the end where everything ties together. But on the other hand, when it's done poorly, we get seasons like 3 and 4, where it just kind of drags on and it never really feels like it went anywhere until the last couple episodes. Another reason that I prefer single arc seasons is because if done poorly, splitting a season into 2 arcs can make the season feel disjointed. If 8 episodes focus on one thing and the other 14 focus on something completely different, the season may not feel as connected or like a true fulfilling season to me. Thankfully, that's one thing The Flash Season 6 did amazingly. And I think it handled this by setting up the second plot of Season 6 super early as episode 2. With the introduction of the metahuman Ultraviolet and the teasing of a shady organization, it wasn't much, but it was enough so that you really thought there was something else going on and something building. It's also cool because when she shows up in future episodes, you recognize her and realize that things are deeper than that just one episode. The same is said for episodes 6 and 7. Episode 6 focused on Ralph's search for Sue Dearborn, which was introduced at the end of season 5, and this comes back up later in episodes 12 and 16. In episode 16, we even learned that Sue was actually hidden as a character during their investigation in episode 6. And a similar thing happens in episode 7, while Barry's being, occupied by Bloodwork. Iris is looking into the shady organization from episode 2 and finding new info. This all coalesces in the episode Marathon after Crisis, but I'll talk about that section of the season much later. It also just plays into the Bloodwork plot very well and makes it so the Bloodwork plot is still clearly the main plot of the season at this moment, but there's definitely something else going on as well in the background. And the best part is, even if they didn't do that, and even if there wasn't set up for the second half of the season, the entire backbone of the season is the exact same. It's Crisis on Infinite Earths. And like I said, the first half of the season deals with Barry's seemingly inevitable death and Crisis, and the second half handles the changes after the creation of New Earth. Having Crisis take up both halves was great and allowed for the season to transition seamlessly, in my opinion, because even though we had set up for Black Hole and Eva in the first half, the Crisis stuff allowed for the change to feel like we were still following the same plot and characters as we were in the first half. Now, I won't talk about Crisis too much here, but I think that it's a pretty enjoyable crossover, extremely flawed, with a ton of issues, but I still really enjoy it. I was also a fan of the switcheroo with Earth 90 Barry Allen dying instead. I get that it's a bit disappointing to some, and I will admit it's a little frustrating to spend so much of the first half of the season setting up for Barry's death, only for him to escape via flimsy writing. But the show manages to rectify this with having the Speed Force literally die and fall apart due to Oliver flooding the entire Speed Force with his energy during Crisis as the Spectre. This is handled very well because from the first few episodes after the Crisis, Barry is feeling weird with the changes, showing weird things going on with his speed, and it all culminates in Death of the Speed Force, one of the most fun yet a little packed and disjointed episodes of the season. And honestly, I think I prefer the Speed Force dying rather than Barry dying or disappearing again. You know, the writers had their shot to do that story in season 4 and they blew it. It's boring now. We knew he'd come back, so there's no reason to do a fake out death. If anything, they should have done a fake out death in Crisis and had him return at the end of Crisis. And I'm glad they didn't do that either, because I think it's far more interesting and rewarding to go the route they did and have the Speed Force die. And if you think about it, Barry needing to let Spectre flood the Speed Force to save everyone is kind of like killing the Flash, because if there's no Speed Force, there's no Flash. So really, the Flash did die to save everyone, if you think about it. That's big brain hours right there. And on top of the nice subversion against Barry's death in Crisis, the loss of the Speed Force added a bunch of tension to later episodes in the season, whether it's the near loss of Joe in episode 16 or his insanely close fight with Godspeed in 18. Hell, there's even the scene in the makeshift season finale where he and Ralph almost don't get away because they literally don't have enough speed. The entire time he's running, you really feel like he might run out at any second, and it's just so awesome. It's one of the best things about it. I should probably talk about the villains now, and I think they are both really, really good. If you saw my videos last year in my Season 5 review, you know I was a huge fan of both Season 5 and Cicada, and while neither villain this year topped Cicada for me, both were extremely fun, and I think I enjoyed them immensely. Bloodwork is probably one of the best written villains on the show as far as character work goes. He's right below Thawne and Orlin in that department, and he's just really awesome. He's got a relatable motive with his fear of death that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, even I can in some ways. Santail Ramathuri also played him fantastically. Sometimes it's a bit confusing as to whether or not he's straight up crazy or if he's just on the edge, but I think it all comes together well enough because he's portrayed fantastically to where even if something doesn't quite add up, you just kind of roll with it because he's having fun playing the villain. It also helps that during his duration on the show, we have some of the best episodes of the show, whether it's the innovative and drama-driven There Will Be Blood, where the entire episode is focused on saving Ramsey, culminating in his downfall to becoming a villain, or the amazing two-parter The Last Temptation of Barry Allen that starts with a deep dive into Barry and his reservations of dying in Crisis, and then ends with a complete and absolute zombie apocalypse of Central City. Last Temptation Part 1 is actually the best episode of the season and one of the best of the show. It dives into Barry's character amazingly and features just some fantastic stuff throughout. I actually highly recommend watching this episode even if you haven't seen the show in years. Hell, it might even get you to come back into it because it's just that fantastic. It might be my favorite of the show. Last Temptation Part 2 is also wonderful. Not as good as Part 1, but still really good. It's directed by a horror film director and it really feels like a mini horror movie with the zombie stuff and everything, and it still manages to wrap up Bloodwork and transition into Crisis in such a great way that even though it's an interesting genre episode, it still really does work. Sadly for me, the season didn't fare as well with Eva McCulloch, aka Mirror Master. Now, don't get me wrong, she's not a bad villain by any means. I said earlier, I enjoy both of these. The season sadly didn't get to finish, which is one of the reasons I feel like she didn't live up to not only her potential, but what Ramsey did either. That being said, I think the arc with Black Hole and everything is really, really good. Switching from Bloodwork to Black Hole is, of course, like I said, helped by the seeding of Black Hole in the first half, but also Crisis helped, and it really just makes it work. The season plays with your expectations a bit because you don't really know what's going on. Is the villain Black Hole and Joseph Carver, or is it the Mirrorverse stuff, and you never really know until the very end? And technically it was both because the season ended early. Joseph Carver was a character who at first I wasn't sold on at all. I thought he was just kind of boring, but by episode 19 I actually really liked him, and not in the way of like him being a good character or anything. I think he was well written, but he was an awful person, and I just kind of enjoy that type of pompous and slimy rich dude that Carver was. The stuff with Iris and Eva in the mirror is sadly some of the weaker stuff this season. It's never awful, and I don't think it's as stretched out as some people say, but you could probably have shaved 1 or 2 episodes off, or at least given Iris and Eva something to actually do in the mirror other than just sit around trying to figure out how to get out. That being said, almost all of my issues with this plot are rectified once we get to Liberation, the season's second best episode. This one's fantastic. It's entirely out of the Flash suit, and it uses everything the season has to be just a fantastic episode of television. It makes the long pacing of Iris having a mirror duplicate and being stuck in the mirror just be completely okay with me. I think having it take this long actually made this episode work a lot better. Bringing back Ramsey for a brief scene in this episode and having his blood be what Eva needs to escape the mirror was an awesome tie together, and another thing that makes both halves of season 6 feel like the same storyline. Iris's mirror doppelganger is one of the most interesting parts of the season as well. On one hand, I will say it is sad that Iris didn't get a lot to do in the season. In fact, she didn't get anything to do at all, really. In the first half, she was kind of shoved to the back except for a few key episodes, and in the second half, she was relegated to the mirror plot, stuck with her mirror version outside. Candace does amazingly as both, but it's a little sad to see real Iris giving such a small part to play. Again, the season didn't technically finish, so I'm sure it would have paid off, but as of now, it's a tad disappointing, and hopefully season 7 could give us a bit more for her to do in the long term. That being said, Mirror Iris was awesome. Seeing her not only manipulate Barry and the team to get what she wants, but also just be evil was really cool. Especially in Liberation, again, I love that episode, and once the jig is up, Candace just plays evil Iris amazingly. There's also a few other small plots that I want to talk about. I guess I'll start with Godspeed since he was introduced in the premiere, and honestly, there's not much to say here. The season just kind of didn't do anything with him after the premiere, and then they had him return in the now penultimate episode, and they didn't do anything in that one either. They just seeded a bunch of future plot points. Maybe he would have played into the finale, but I do really think that episode's fine, but it's really nothing but hype up for the future that I'm sure will be better with time, once you have season 7. The second plot point, which ties back to Crisis, is the Wells stuff with Nash. Now, I haven't mentioned Nash yet, but he's fine. He's really nothing special, and I think I like almost every other main Wells more than him, but he is cool enough. His plot in the first half leads to him being Pariah in Crisis, which I think was awesome, and his plot in the second half with him merging with the personalities of previous Wellses is also awesome. Nash himself is mostly just fine, I guess, and I think he had a decent arc with the new character Allegra. I enjoy her enough, and I think her arc with Nash was decent, and I think it wrapped up well enough to where I'm okay with where it went. The best part about the Nash stuff, of course, was Thawne's return. This was awesome, and when it happened, I was a little bit worried that throwing in Reverse Flash into the mix was something the season didn't really need, as it was getting kind of crowded, and even in retrospect, I feel like it's one of the things the season didn't need and feels as a weird detour, but it ultimately worked because it was used to forward both Nash and Barry's respective character arcs and led to some amazing moments, so I can't really be too upset. It was just a really solid episode, and it didn't last too long, but it does still feel a little unnecessary overall. Lastly, we have the finale. Success is assured. The 19th episode of the season was not intended to be the finale. Luckily, though, The Flash this season had an angel looking out for it, because episode 19 is not only a big episode of the season and plot relevant, but one that wraps up just enough to about work as a finale. With Eva killing Carver, a huge cliffhanger with Iris, a fun final battle, and a few character arcs actually revolving and resolving. It's really cool. Not all of them resolved, some of them took new forms. I think the surprise finale actually did work. On my first watch of it, I was a bit disappointed, but surprisingly, after watching the whole season in a row and binging it and getting to this finale, I'm surprised to say, again, I'm completely satisfied. I thought that this would be the one part of the season that doesn't hold up at all, but I walked away from that thinking that was actually a good finale for the season. I don't think a lot of people are going to be too surprised because it still works well enough. Sure, it's a bummer that Iris is still in the mirror and some stuff is resolved, but Eva killing Carver, transitioning Black Hole from the big bad to her for the next season is dope. It works to set things up for the season with Eva, and I enjoyed that. I think it's also cool that the villain won, and you kind of have this storyline of them trying again next year. Again, some things being left unsolved is kind of annoying, but I think it's good. It also sets up a bunch of character stuff, especially for Sue, and just overall felt like a decent conclusion. It's not my favorite finale at all, but one I surprisingly appreciate a lot more after binging the season, and that's great because I thought I was going to really dislike this finale. A few stray thoughts before I wrap up this review. I'm going to mention the character of Chester, who's kind of a weird character. I'm sure he would have had more to do in the true finale, but as of right now, he's just kind of there. He's fun enough, and I'm thinking he's a Cisco replacement, but I'm not sure. But yeah, he's fine. Sue was also great. I loved her relationship with Ralph, and I'm excited to see where the finale, setup goes with her and Ralph. I'm excited to see how they clear her name. I'm assuming it'll be done as soon as they take care of Eva. The Black Hole assassins from throughout the season being in the makeshift finale is also another thing that made it work for a finale for me. And it really is a shame that the season got cut short because it's one of the most consistently great ones of the show for me. And now we're going to talk about my final rating and thoughts. So here are my top 3 and bottom 3 episodes of the season, excluding the crossover episode. So my number 1 episode of the season is The Last Temptation of Barry Allen Part 1. Brilliant episode. I love it to death. It's so good. It's just a great character study of Barry with amazing stuff in it and just a really great story going on throughout it. Liberation is my number 2. Again, I've talked about this one. Fantastic culmination to the Mirror arc. Despite it leaving with Iris stuck in it, I feel like I made it work enough to where I'm okay with her still being in it, even after the season finale. And number 613, season 6, episode 13, Grodd Friended Me. I didn't mention this episode in the review or Grodd at all. This is one of the more filler episodes of the season, but I absolutely adored it. I never thought a Gorilla Grodd episode would be one of my favorites, but Yeah, this episode's fantastic. Fucking Rod and the Flash merge in it, and we have a super fast gorilla as one of the main plot points of the episode. What the fuck? Moving on to my bottom three, we have Love is a Battlefield is my least favorite episode. Really just a boring episode that feels reminiscent of some of the worst parts of season 4. I don't like Amunet Black. I don't really like anything in this episode, and it just fails to capitalize on the cliffhanger of Iris getting sucked into the mirror in episode 10. My second least favorite is Kiss Kiss Breach Breach, which is season 6, episode 5. Nothing too terribly wrong with this episode. I still like it. I like it a lot more than Love is a Battlefield. I just think it kind of feels a little janky, I guess, and doesn't work too well with the overall story. There's one scene with Ramsey in it because it's in the first half, and it just made me wish they were focusing more on that plot than random fridging of a female character gypsy plot. And my third least favorite episode, which is an episode that I actually really do enjoy, is Pay the Piper, the Godspeed episode. Really just kind of at the bottom because it doesn't do anything special either with Godspeed or with the characters in general. But again, it's still an enjoyable episode, and I enjoy Kiss Kiss Breach Breach and Pay the Piper enough. The only one that I can actually say I dislike is Love is a Battlefield. And on top of that, here are my favorite episodes ranked from favorite to least favorites on the screen now. So yeah, overall, The Flash Season 6 to me is a fantastic season of not just The Flash, but the Arrowverse in general. It's got a ton of fantastic episodes, like 17 out of 19 of these are like an 8 out of 10 for me, and I think that's just insane. There's great storylines, both halves have them, and the finale works surprisingly well despite the situation they were in. I just think Season 6 is a really, really great season, and I'm sure it would have been better if it finished properly. I'm gonna have to give Season 6 a 9 out of 10. I cannot give it anything lower and feel good about my score. Like, maybe over time the season might drop to like a strong 8, but for right now I think it's a 9 out of 10. I think this is an amazing season, and one that I will continue to rewatch, because rewatching it and thinking about it afterwards has just made me so happy. So there you have it, my review of The Flash Season 6. What did you think about The Flash Season 6? Go ahead and put in the comments down below. I'm interested to see your thoughts. The Flash is not returning until January, which sucks, but that just gives me more time to make more Flash content on my channel. I'm going to be rewatching the show from season 1 to season 6 sometime later this year, and I'll probably put out reviews of seasons 1 through 4 to go together with the rest of the reviews on my channel, so that'll be really, really cool. Go ahead and check out my Twitter, where I was tweeting about every episode pretty much after it aired. It's going to be really epic to see my thoughts on a rewatch. I'll probably make a thread for that. That would be cool. But yeah, just go ahead and subscribe for more content. Go ahead and check out my website and my podcast, which have great stuff. I have a couple of episode reviews on my website for the first 13 as of now. I'm going to be catching up, writing those reviews after my rewatch. So there's that. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.